Okay, so it's been a few months since I did my last video going through some of the presets on the Cortex Cloud. And in that time, we've had the 3.0 release. We've had some of the plugin compatibility. So I figure it's a good time to kind of dig in and see if there's any new presets out there that are worth checking out. So you can see here I'm on Cortex Cloud. The first thing I want to say is, I don't know if you guys check out any of these staff pick lists. Some of my presets have been included on these before, but I do need to give a thanks out to the staff at Cortex Cloud because they did this one around kind of Lead of Legend. So basically presets that sound like, you know, some famous guitarist. And they pulled 4 of my presets into this list of 8. So that's usually flattering. So thanks to the staff at the Cortex Cloud. I appreciate that they like what I'm doing. So let's go ahead and look at some of the latest presets. So we're just going to hit here, show all, and we're going to apply a filter. We want to look in the past 3 months. I'm a guitarist, and we're going to sort by popularity. So let's see what we got here. And just to reiterate what we're hoping to find here for those who maybe haven't seen these videos I've done before, I'm looking for presets, just obviously that sound good. I'm looking for maybe if there's presets that have new captures I've never tried before. I'm looking for new ways to use some of the effects or things like that. Obviously, since we've had the 3.0 release and some of the plugin compatibility, I would definitely like to find some presets in here that maybe are using the new plugin capabilities and we can try those out. But let's see what we've got here. So we've got a couple from the Tone Ranger. We can check out this Gibson J200. It's not an amp I'm super familiar with. What else we got? There's one of mine. We can skip that. Jack Gardner, Worst Lead. All right, let's check that one out. I like Jack Gardner. He's a great player. We've got a Soldano. We can check that one out. Here's a Gojira one. We'll check that out. Creamy Crunch Lead. He's using the Plini Crunch and the Gojira cab. That sounds interesting. Let's check out what Tone Ranger did with the Plini. This is interesting. Again, I'm interested in seeing how people are combining some of these plugins together. Let's try this one. Looks like they're doing some interesting things. Let's try this Dr. Z. And this one seems to be using the new doubler. Let's check and see how that sounds. Look at this Gojira Rig. And let's just get a couple more. Oh, Toto. Let's see what that sounds like. And we'll try this other Gojira one. All right, so I think we've got a good number of them. Let's go ahead and jump over to the Cortex Control and pull these down onto our Cortex. Okay, so we're in Cortex Control. We'll go ahead and go over to the directory. We're on presets. We're going to look at downloads. So here's all the presets that I marked for download. And we're just going to go ahead and save these to my device. And I think this bank is empty. We'll just start sticking them here. So I can do one at a time like that. Or the other thing I can do is I can just highlight them all. Say I want to save them to my device. And we're going to put them up here, starting here. And there we go. So let's go ahead and go over to those and check them out. So we're going to go up to bank 23. We'll start with this Soldano one. Okay, so we're going to go through the presets. For all the captures here today, I'm going to be demoing it with my HSS Strat. So this is my John Page Classic. It's the most versatile guitar I have. And so that's why we're going to use it here for demoing these presets. And let's see what we got here. So we've got a wah. I don't have an expression pedal hooked up right now, so we're going to skip over that. An MX5, we're splitting that. And on one path, we've got some overdrives into the Soldano with a cab. On the other side, we have a delay. So this is interesting. So he's doing a split here, and sending basically the clean signal into a delay, so that delay is not going through the amp at all. Right now he's got that muted. And then on row 3, we've got a reverb into a low-high cut. You've also got a parametric EQ here, a tremolo, a plate reverb, and then he's got utility gain on the outside. I'm assuming this is just maybe doing a boost. So let's go ahead and see how we got this set up. So he's got 3 scenes. He's got a clean, a drive. Looks like that's just adding in the overdrive pedal, which is a tube screamer. And then for solo, he's adding in that clean delay, and he's adding some of that EQ. So maybe this is meant to set up in hybrid mode. So let's go ahead and see if that's the case. Yeah, so he's got this set up in hybrid mode. So the top row is pedals. We can turn on the vibe, the tremolo, or the fuzz. And on the lower level, we have the scenes. So let's start with the clean tone and hear how it sounds. I don't know if I'd describe that as clean. So interesting. The reverb is really tight on this. He's got a room reverb, and then he's got a plate reverb. And then he's using a low-high cut. So it looks like he's cutting out a good chunk of the low end and a little bit of the high end. Now, I'm wondering why he's doing that. He's also doing it basically on the cab. So that's interesting that he's doing basically the same cuts in the cab and down here. I'm not quite sure why you would duplicate that. Yeah, if you just do it the cab, the delay might come through with some of those frequencies. But that's interesting. It feels a little redundant, but maybe there's another reason I'm not aware of. So if we go to drive, none of the amp parameters are scene specific. So all we're doing is turning on the OD, and there's really not much drive being added here. It's mostly just adding some of that kind of mid push. So, and then for the solo, that's where he's adding in this analog delay in the parallel. Maybe you could turn on the fuzz with that. So that's kind of interesting. You have this, basically a DI signal going through this delay. What's the mix? So he's pushing up the B level, which makes sense because this is going to be a very quiet path since there's no amp on it. So kind of interesting tone. You can hear it adds a lot of clarity to it. So it's an interesting trick. Not something I've done a lot of, and I should play around with that more, this idea of having a clean delayed signal next to a distorted amp. So let's go ahead and move on to the next preset. So this one's using a Plini. And I wonder, we'll go back to our modes configuration. Oops. And put us in scene mode. So let's run through our general setup here. So we've got a compressor into a Thomas preamp capture, a TS9 capture, and I'm not entirely sure what that capture is. I'm sure other folks can put that in the comments. We've got a utility gain that has the level hooked to an expression pedal, so we won't be using that. We have a tape delay into a shimmer reverb, and then you're going down into a chorus, into a digital delay, and you're running 2 Plini crunch amps. Looks like the same basic settings, just they're switching the bright switch on or off. You got into a Plini cab, and then more reverbs on the end, and then a graphic EQ with a high pass filter on. Anyway, let's check this out. What does it sound like? So I'm not getting any signal through. That's probably because of this. I'm just going to take this off. So it's very quiet. I'm just going to push the output just a little bit. So how's he doing a split? So he's doing an A-B split. So he's splitting stereo, and then he's panning fully left and right coming out of that. So maintaining all the stereo-ness of the effects coming in. So this is adding in this this pedal capture that we have up here. And you can see it also turned on this digital delay. This is a dotted eighth lead. A lead boost. So he's boosting it with the Thomas preamp. Interesting. Not sure how I would use that. So a lot of effects here. I would be interested to hear the songs that he's using some of these tones on. I think the main thing in this preset is I may check out some of these captures in some of my other presets. But let's move on. All right, Toto. So interesting. So clean shift with delay. So let's see what he's doing. So he's got a gate on the front, which is kind of interesting. So it's the plug-in gate. That's interesting, but he's not using the gate on the input block. You've got a compressor into an SD1, parametric EQ, kind of pushing the mids. It's a very 80s kind of thing to do. Interesting that he has 2 different EQs. I guess maybe it's easier to have 2 separate ones than to programmatically change all the settings per scene. You've got a Bogna into a Bogna cab, so that's pretty nice. You're doing a stereo pitch shift, so he's splitting. He's just doing a normal split, which I think is fine because there's nothing stereo up front. he's got one 12 cents that way and one minus 12, mixed pretty low. He's only running the second one through the delay and reverb. And nothing's getting pan left and right. So that's kind of interesting. So this pitch shift is not getting any ambient effects on it at all. And this one is. And the mix on these are really low. Well, the 45% maybe is a little high, but the delay is really low. So this clean tone overall is pretty dry. So it seems like the shift is just upping the mix on the different pitch shifters. Okay. It's pretty subtle though. So I think that the one thing I would probably do different is you could probably get away with doing this in one equalizer. Let's go ahead and move on. So Z-Rec, oh, this is the Dr. Z amp. So this is only going to output one. I'm going to set it to multi-ounce. So we have a comp into a Thomas preamp, Paisley drive. We have a Dr. Z amp, two Dr. Z amps. Looks like just different channels. We're running through stereo cabs. And looks like we're panning one of them 25% left and the other 25% right. So just trying to get a little bit of spread by using different cabs. One's a UKC30, so they're both C30s, one's the 69, one's the 65. So that's pretty straightforward. We have a parametric EQ, a slapback delay, and on this one we're getting a modulated reverb. We've got a tremolo, we've got a stereo tape delay, and then a modulated reverb on the end. So clean. Clean ambient, puts in those delays. Oh, and the tremolo too. So the driven sound. Nice smooth overdrive. A little dark for me. I would probably just push the treble a little bit. And let's use the drive chorus. Nice ambient effect to it. interesting, he's only running a single tape delay with this one, rather than the dual delay. So some good sounds. The Dr. Z captures are a little dark for my taste, but you can adjust for that. Let's move on. So Engl. So this has got some juice to it. Let's go ahead and put in stomp mode. Okay, so. And then you're going into this angle and you're running that through. So you're running that through two cabs, but not putting them left or right, just keeping them straight on. You've got a CA standard. Okay, so one of the things I'm noticing here is he's got the mics panned hard left on one cab, and on the other cab, panned hard right. The problem is when you come back in and your mixer is just putting that signal down the center, you're not getting that impact. So panning the mics and then recombining in this mixer is basically negating what you're trying to do. So the way I would do this instead is you don't need to pan the mics in the cabs. I would just pan the cabs here. But the other thing is the cabs aren't really different. There's a little bit of a change in where the 57 is, but other than that, the cabs are the same. Running two together and running the same cabs with the same mics, even if you fully pan them left and right, you're not going to hear the difference because this isn't two separate cabs. Like, you know, in the real world, two cabs, even if they're the same brand, the same model, are going to be slightly different. And you'll get a spread in the real world if you're running them in a room together. If you're running them on a modeler and you run two cabs and they're the same, that's just an algorithm. And the algorithm is going to be perfectly the same every time. And so I don't think you're going to get any spread to the sound in doing this by having the same cabs. I would probably combine the 3 with a 1 maybe. So I love the V3003. It's one of my favorite 4x12s. But what I would probably do is maybe make this one V01. Maybe get a little bit of a difference there, or maybe change the dynamic mic to maybe make this one a 421 with a ribbon 10, and this one's a 57 with a ribbon 160, and you pan those left and right, and then again, those sound slightly different, and you'll get a little bit more of a spread. So Crystal Sky. So let's go back to scene mode. So interesting. Let's see what's going on here. So we've got a compressor. So we're splitting. So we're sending the dry signal into the Gojira shimmer reverb. And then we've got a transparent blend here with the output from the compressor. And then this line is going into the Gojira clean, the Plini cab, and a tape delay. And it's going down to row 3 and then to multi-out. So the one thing I would say is this doesn't need to go to row 3. So all you're doing is go to multi-outs, just send it to multi-out, and then I would turn this one off. So there's really no reason to go to row 3. And it's not a big impact, but when you engage row 3 and 4, my understanding is when you engage the extra CPU there, you are introducing a very tiny amount of latency to it. So if you can get your preset onto rows 1 and 2, you'll get a little bit less of a latency to the, the sound execution. Let's talk about what's going on with this transparent blend. So he's got this blend here. So he's blending in the signal out of this compressor at this point, but he's got the blend at 0%, which means all of the tone is just what's coming out of the shimmer reverb. It's not actually blending anything in. So I'm not quite sure. I mean, because we pump this up to 100%, then you're just getting out of the compressor. And you don't get any shimmer reverb. If you wanted it at 50-50, or something like this. So I'm not sure what's going on with this blend. Let's move on. So time spiral. Huge hotness. Ooh. Interesting. So what do we got going on here? We got transpose, we're dropping it 7 semitones. We've got a noise reduction gate with the source from in. So he's doing the transpose and then he's doing a gate that he's taking input 1 as the source. So that's kind of interesting. And then we've got an octaver, and then he's got an OD. You can see he's got no distortion on it, so he's really just using that to shape the tone into our Gojira hot. So this is basically a 5150 red Gojira cab. You've got a graphic EQ over here, along with some high-pass filter, low-pass filter. You've got a doubler that's taking its input from the gate. So this is kind of interesting. So the input for the doubler is the unaffected tone. So that's kind of interesting. Then down here in stereo, you've got a delay and a phaser, and they're running in parallel. And there's no stereo piece of it. Level B is assigned to a scene specific. So even if you turn it on, you can raise the level up and down. So that's kind of interesting. I mean, it's a cool tone. What does time spiral do? I'm not quite sure where you're going to use this, but that sounds awesome. I find it very inspiring to try like new riffs. It's different. I mean, it's cool, the use of the transpose with the octaver, and the doubling coming out of the gate means your double signal is all you're getting is the transpose. You're getting a clean direct signal. All right, creamy crunch lead. So we've got a Plini compressor going into an adaptive gate that's sourced on the inputs. So you're compressing and then you're putting the gate after the compressor. I'm not sure why you would do that. I'm not sure why you wouldn't just use the gate that's built into the input. This isn't the first time we've seen this here today of having a block and then having a gate that's sourced off the input. So if you can help me understand what the rationale for that is, I'd be interested to know. I always just use the input gate on the input itself, and that reduces my noise, and then I'm good to go. So, you know, the only time I ever put a gate in my preset is there's a few of these blocks that can get kind of loud. I've had that problem with a blues driver overdrive sometimes. It can get kind of noisy. And in that case, I might use a gate after that. But a compressor typically isn't super noisy, especially if you put a gate in front of it. So if anybody can help me understand the reason for this setup, I'd be interested to know. And then we've got a Plini drive into the Plini Crunch, the Gojira cab. We've got a graphic EQ. And then again, we have a doubler that's doubling off the compressed sound. So it's doubling with the clean tone, which is kind of cool. And then we've got a circular delay into the Gojira reverb. So let's go ahead and hear what this sounds like. So tight crunch. Not bad. Let's try it doubled. So again, we're doubling the tone with the direct signal, with the output of the compressor. So the doubled tone is a clean tone rather than the overdriven tone from the amp. So you're going to get some good clarity from that. Definitely a trick that I'm going to play around with some more. Creamy lead. Not bad. So, oh, this is the Jack Gardner one for worst lead. What's he using here? So we've got an 808, do a 2203 into the Brit cap. I mean, this is old school, man. Marshall with a 2-screamer in front of it. You're pushing some of the mids, digital delay, a room reverb, and he's got an envelope filter on the front end. Where does he turn on the envelope filter? He's got it scene specific. There we go. And Gojira Rig. Wow, there's a lot here. Let's go through it. Again, we've got a gate on the front and a gate on the input control. So that's kind of interesting. I don't know why you would do a double gate like that. We've got a pitch shifter that's moving us down to semitones. We've got a wham, Chief SD1 on the front. And then we're splitting. We're doing a normal split. The merge looks like it's moving around quite a bit, but it's mostly, this one's panned fully left and right. And so you've got a blue mixed with a red, delay in front of the red. Each has its own cabinet, and each has its own EQ that's slightly different. Interesting. And then you run down here. Again, you're splitting a normal split, and one path is pretty much dry, and the other path has another gate, a pitch shifter, compressor, some overdrives, deluxe reverb into a cabinet, and then EQ, and then you've got delay, reverb. So let's go ahead and revamp this preset to try to make it a little bit more efficient. All right, and so here's my version of that same general preset. I tried to keep it sounding as exact as I could. So one of the first things we did, we go back to the original These utility gates here, I got rid of those. We've got a gate on the input. I don't feel like we need these extra gates. And there's two of them, one on the Deluxe Reverb line and then one up here on the EV 5150 line. Also, there's a duplication in the pitch shifter here for the transpose that they're doing. I collapsed those into one, and instead of the pitch shifter, I went ahead and used the new transpose block. We kept the WAM. There is also duplication of the Chief SD1, and so I collapsed that into one piece and use scene-specific settings. So if we go back over to the new one, you can see we've got the transpose. I've got this off for now. I don't want to mess with the transpose, but we've got this here. We've got the WAM. We've got the compressor for the clean. We've got the SD1 and its scene-specific settings. We've got the RAT that we brought up from the clean line for the Deluxe Reverb. And then we go into our split. So I did keep the split here for one reason, because there is a scene where these are being combined, and each amp has its own EQ after the cab. And so really to keep that setting, you had to keep these together. What I did do is a couple things here. One, on the scenes that aren't running that second amp, I disabled the splitter. So the scenes that are just running the blue or the Deluxe Reverb, that splitter's off. So we're just disabled that. The other thing I did is the mics were being panned left and right on the different lines. I went ahead and put those back to center. We're going to manage all of our panning via the mixer. So for the blue red together, we do have them pan 50-50, but other than that, everything's down the center. And then down here, I completely got rid of line 4. We don't really need it. We've got our Deluxe Reverb and its cab and its EQ down here. And then our ambient effects are unchanged. So overall, it sounds pretty much the same. So here's the blue. If we switch to red, we are enabling that splitter, and on the mixer, and you'll see I'm not sending any signal to line A. We want to make sure we're keeping it clean. And on the mixer back, everything's still centered, but we're pulling back the levels on line A. This combines the two together. They're pan left and right. And then this is just the blue, the dark version. Again, this is splitter is off, and we're just using the blue line. And then down here, all we're doing here is turning on the Deluxe Reverb. All of the splitters off, all of the 5150 stuff is off, and we just have. And you'll see here, the Chief SD1 settings are different on the two different scenes. So we didn't have to replicate that. It's on for all three of these. So got this, we turn on the RAT. So I think overall a much cleaner way to manage this. It's still a little complex because of the way the two amps are being used in parallel for this one scene. Other than that, you can get rid of all the splits, but because we are running a dual amp thing there, it did necessitate a little bit of kind of overhead in the separate cabs because you've got separate EQs behind the cabs. We could probably run these through one cab and then just have separate EQs, but we'd probably get a little bit of a different tone. So that's another way that you could kind of reclaim a little bit of CPU. You could eliminate one of the cab blocks, but it doesn't really take up that much, so I'm not going to worry about it. Anyway, so I hope you found going through these presets helpful. For me, kind of the main things that I'm thinking about is, so we saw multiple folks using the sidechain, which is great to see, and using it with the doubler. So you're doubling in a kind of a direct signal with a distorted signal. So I found that kind of interesting, and I'm going to play around more with that. Didn't really find any super great new captures. I will be checking out, what was the one that we were looking at? This one here. I will be checking these captures out more just to see, especially this one. I want to understand more about it. Other than that, we found a few things I think that could be improved upon, and hopefully you learned from that here today. And as always, thanks for watching.